Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this PACE webinar. We are very delighted to have you with us today. It's very exciting for us, first time this webinar. But today is all about the PACE project, a project that lasted 4 years and is coming to an end. We would like to share our findings and recommendations with you. PACE, that stands for Providing Access to Childcare and Employment, is a European Interact 2Cs project that was conducted by 13 partners in 4 different countries: Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and the UK. We will discuss our findings in 2 workshops later. The first workshop will be on childcare and employment, and the second about flexible childcare. But before, I would like to give the floor to Gabriella De Francesco, alderman of the city of Mechelen and former coordinator of this project. Gabriella?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, UK. Bonjour, France. Goedemorgen, Vlaanderen en Nederland. Welcome to this webinar, and even though I really wanted to see you alive, it's now Corona, the virus is in Europe, so we can't do this live. But still, whatever, you see me and I don't see you, but whatever, that's the thing, we have to deal with it. In 2017, I gave the opening ceremony, the opening speech at the opening event at the PACE project in Ghent. Now I'm doing the welcome words here in Antwerp, somewhere in Belgium, as an alderman, as a formal project leader. I've always been very proud of this project. As an alderman now, I'm really proud to introduce the slot event at the PACE. It was very exciting. We had a lot of courage. It was falling and growing and standing up every time. But it was, wow, what a project. And without this project, we couldn't do this. We moved in childcare and we also moved in some kind of employment things. At least I'm very proud of all the parents in Europe, because the parents give us the courage to move on. The parents who believed in us, the parents who made a big step. So, looking forward to the next 2 hours. Please stay with us, stay tuned, and I hope you have enjoying this kind of webinar. Even I always say the sun is shining, always shining in Mechelen. If you have time, please come visit us, because I'm looking really forward to meet you all. Enjoy.
Thank you, Gabriella. And now a question that maybe some of you have. Why did we do the PACE project? Did Linda? She will explain.
No matter what an organization wants to do or change, it works best if all people involved know why they are doing what they are doing. And that is why we would like to introduce to you the why of the PACE project. Now, in the case of this project, the why was not an abstract idea, but the why consisted of lived experiences by real families, real people. And I would like to introduce you to 2 of these families. Please meet the Caillot family. Mr. Caillot has a permanent job in a factory and he works night shifts only. Mrs. Caillot has a nursing degree, but the last couple of years she's been at home to take care of their lovely daughter, Louise. Louise is now 2 years old. Now, Mrs. Caillot is urged to find a job by social services. She finds a job as a nurse, but there's one inconvenience. Every other week, Mrs. Caillot would have to work until 9 o'clock in the evening. Now, at this time, Mr. Caillot is already in the factory, but not all night. So they would need childcare, but on an irregular basis and late at night. They start to look for childcare, but this turns out to be rather difficult. The childcare organizations they contact, they are not open until late in the evening, and some of them also expressed their worries to the Caillot family about being childcare on such an irregular basis might not be so good for their child. So the Caillot family considers taking a private caretaker, but this turns out to be too expensive, and in the end, Mrs. Caillot has to refuse her job. Meet Miss Mbele. Miss Mbele is a single mother. She has a child, a daughter, who is 1 year old. At one point, she is contacted by the employment service, and the employment service urges Mrs. Mbele to take a course, as Mrs. Mbele does not have a lot of qualifications and also not a lot of job experience, and the course would help her to increase her chances on the employment market. Ms. Mbele is willing to take the course, but she encounters a problem. The course will start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's not in her hometown, so she would have to travel towards it. And in order to do that, she will have to leave her house at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, Ms. Mbele has already found a childcare service, which she can trust. She feels she can trust it, but it only opens at 7:30 in the morning. Ms. Mbele, she calls the employment service to explain the difficult situation she is in, but they don't show much understanding. They urge her to find a solution for a child. As a staff members of the employment service, they also find childcare solutions and are able to be at work at 8 o'clock. In the end, Ms. Mbele does not know what to do now. The Caillot family and Ms. Mbele, they are not alone. All the 14 PACE partners across the 4 countries, they encountered families, very diverse families, who all had similar problems. The one thing they had in common, no matter how diverse they were, was that they struggled to align their family life with work or with a trajectory towards work. Together, all these families, they are the why of the PACE project. Now, these situations, they do raise a lot of questions, and also the partners of the PACE project, they had a lot of questions on why things are as they are, questions about the systems we are living in, questions about policies, questions about practices, and questions about values. I have 5 questions for you that have been raised by partners, and I would like to go very quickly through them to leave more space for the practices. The first one is, why can't Ms. Mbele and Mrs. or Mr. Caillot stay at home to take care of their child? Before going into the why, I have a poll for you. Should Mrs. or Mr. Caillot have the right to stay at home? This is about rights. And you can choose now your answer, yes, no, or you can think it might be too complex a question. I return to the why to explain why this would be very difficult for these families to do. This would be difficult because of recent policies. From the mid-1990s onward, the labor market policies started to concentrate on activation. The main goal of these policies became guiding as many people as possible to find a paid job. A paid job was considered one's responsibility towards the society. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused by time getting up. These policies, they force people to find I see the poll has not been lanced. I don't know why. So I will just briefly go into this why question and into these activation policies. Telling you still that before, policies concentrated on creating the right to work, and now this right has become a duty. We can also look into the values behind this question, because care is a value that we rate quite highly in our society, but not if we look into the practices, the concrete systems and practices, because then care is often invisible. Mrs. Caillot would be at home to take care and nobody would see it, and she does not get any reward for it, and certainly not in money. The care workers, we all know now, care work is often comes with uncomfortable hours, with low salaries, and it's often not visible in our society. And thus, we have this tension between the care and work as a responsibility. Next question. Why can't the Caillot family find childcare that matches their working hours? This has to do with the alignment of childcare and labor market. Now, childcare, it does follow the labor market, but at a slower pace, and not in every country at the same pace. But the last decades, childcare has followed the labor market because it started to create much more places, because more women started to work and much more places were needed. And that is what childcare policies did. But nowadays, there has been a lot of changes in the labor market. We're living in a 24-hour economy. A lot of jobs have become very flexible, and also in the COVID crisis, we noticed this. And childcare does not follow, of course. The partners raised a lot of critical questions on whether childcare would need to follow these labor market evolutions, because we can be critical about it. Do we have to do this? Is it morally right to organize childcare on a flexible or 24-hour basis? And also in practice, it would be very difficult and it would be very costly. But in the meantime, the Caillot family does not find a solution for their problem. Next question. Why couldn't Ms. Mbele count on help from the employment service? Now, a lot of staff members of employment services, they do help, but the help is not embedded in the system. And this means it would be difficult for some families to get help and to get support in finding this childcare. And this means that if we don't align it in the system, there will always be families who will struggle. The fourth question, why would childcare providers consider childcare at unusual hours or at very short notice bad for children? This has to do with the pedagogical function of childcare, which has paid a lot of attention to stability due to some research showing that unstable surroundings would not be so good for children. Now, this stability has often been translated into organizational practices and not at all, or not only in pedagogical practices. And it might be useful to find alternatives, pedagogical alternatives for organizational stability. And then the last question is like a very general question. Why are things so difficult for these and other families? And I leave it to you to think about it and to see all these systems, policies and values coming together. Now, during the PACE project, this was why. During the PACE project, the 14 partners, they tried to find alternative solutions to help these concrete families. And this resulted in a lot of practices, useful practices, which will be presented in the workshops, but it also resulted into policy recommendations. And you can find them in the different publications of the PACE project. You can see them here, and they will be presented later on this day. One conclusion the PACE project also had, we have been talking about practices, we have been talking about systems and policies, but we also have been talking about values. And one conclusion is that care should be valued more highly. The non-paid care as well as the paid care of the childcare workers. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dietlinde, for this explanation. And now it's time to go to workshop 1, that is on childcare and employment. During this workshop, we will discuss what childcare-based opportunities bring to the table for families, employers, and childcare in itself. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. We will answer as many as we can. Anne, floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Anne Raas. I work for the Early Childhood Department of Artevelde University of Applied Sciences, and I'm happy to welcome you to this first workshop. I'm presenting this workshop, and in the next workshop it will be my colleague Anne Piessens, but of course we're only the hosts. We couldn't have done this without the input and feedback of our colleagues, and of course, we couldn't have done it without all the work of the PACE project partners during the last 4 years. So this workshop is about the PACE approach to childcare and employment. It's not easy to talk to no one, so it's my first time to do this, a webinar like this. I would like to know a little bit more about you. It would be really nice for me to know what sector you are from. Is it early years, employment, welfare? Would be really nice if you could indicate that through a poll, and then I'll see the results as they come in. So when I give examples, and I'll give a lot of examples, I can make sure they do meet your expectations. Okay, so Dietlinde explained why we did the PACE project. I will say a little bit more for whom we did it. All the project partners worked with parents who are at a distance from childcare and work. But of course, there's a lot of diversity across the 4 countries and across regions. The childcare system differs, the activation system differs, they have different barriers, and that, of course, influences who has access and who has no access. I'll give a very easy example. When you live in rural France, you might have more problems with mobility to get to work or to childcare than when you live in a big city in the Netherlands. What was the same or similar across all the partners that we worked mainly with mothers. So almost 94% of the parents in PACE were moms. Okay. What will we do in this workshop? There's 3 main parts, and actually also a 4th, that is maybe even the most important one. First, I will guide you through the integrated approach that we used in PACE. Let's say it was the key we used to give people access to childcare and employment. Second, I will discuss 5 examples from the PACE project, so very concrete cases, PACE cases we call it. And then we'll end with some quick take care and take home messages. And I can see the results of the poll coming in. Okay, see a lot of people from early childhood and a lot of others, but also some people from employment and welfare. So wherever you're from, you're very welcome. And I'll make sure I also discuss employment as well as early years when I give examples. Okay. Important for you to know is that the last part of this workshop, and I'll just check the time so I don't talk too long, we'll try to take at least 15 minutes for discussion and questions. So the questions, obviously, it's your questions, so don't hesitate to send in any questions that you may have. One of our colleagues here is seeing all the questions that are coming in. He will send them to us so we can discuss them later. So don't forget. Yeah, the PACE project it took 4 years. It was a complex project. A lot of things happened. It was often very fun. It was sometimes difficult. And now I have the task to say something about it in 20 minutes. That's a challenge. So I will immediately get to the core of the project. So an integrated approach to childcare and employment. Start with the integrated approach. On itself, that is not new. We already know about referrals, information sharing, joined up working. But what did we do in PACE? We put childcare in the mix, and we used this integrated approach to make a real change in the lives of families with young children. So at the core, childcare and employment are not well aligned. Well, they actually should be, because when people want to get back to employment, they need childcare. So someone has to do the matchmaking, and presently it's often the parents who have to do that. And I guess if you're a parent, you might have encountered days where you think, oh my God, how am I going to combine everything? Well, for some parents, this matchmaking is sheer impossible. So what we did in PACE, we actually moved the responsibility of doing this matchmaking to a key worker. That's why we say the key worker is key. So all the PACE project partners worked with key workers, designated key workers who support individual families towards childcare and employment. These key workers have a lot of expertise. They know the systems, they can help parents navigate the systems. They're also aware of the solutions that are there in childcare and in activation, but often these sectors, they don't know of each other's solutions. So the key worker does a lot of matchmaking, he supports the parents, but he's also part of a process-based approach, a kind of systematic step-by-step approach that also avoids that when the key worker is ill or not present, that there is no support anymore for the parents. Okay, let's say a little bit more about this integrated approach by key worker. I think the first is that we start from the parents. They are at the center. When moving towards employment, the key worker will start from what the parents need and what their goals are. And also, we involve parents in building the trajectory. So I think that's a key characteristic of the PACE project. The second one is that this key worker goes farther than just supporting individual families. The key worker will also try to make a change on an organizational and on a system level and advocate for parents' rights. In childcare, he will try to make childcare more flexible, but that's the next webinar. In activation and employment support, the key worker will try to make it more accessible and aligned with childcare. And then the third one, in activation and employment support, often we start from, it's about people's skills, it's about their employability. People who are very far from employment have either low skills or low employability. In PACE, we do this different. We start from a broad outlook. It means that we also take other life domains into account. Why? Because when people move to employment, there's not only the childcare that can be problematic. There are also other barriers that have to be taken into account before people can start moving towards employment. Or there are problems that arise along the way. Let me again give a simple example. If someone has no car, no driver's license, doesn't know how to ride a bike, and he cannot reach a school or childcare or an employer, you will first have to work on that. If there's a housing or a health problem, all the same. So I think that's 3 core things to take into account if you really want to go towards sustainable employment and a better quality of life for families. Okay. May sound really nice, but it's of course not simple. If you want to do this, you need a lot. First, you need staff in place. You need this key worker. We ask the parents what they value about this key worker. They value that this is a positive, non-sanctioning person who motivates them, boosts their self-confidence, who is present and supportive. But not only that, it's also someone with a lot of expertise, who knows the solutions, who knows how to navigate the system. Preferably, the key worker is also supported by a team and is not working completely on his or her own. Then we'll move on the circle to the upper right half, and at least for me, I don't know for you. Anyway, the system, you need a trajectory to work from where you start reaching out to parents to where they transition to employment. How will you underpin this with childcare? What steps are you going to take? What forms do you need even? But also, what kind of building? Where will the key worker be? In childcare, in another building? I'll show you a quick movie fragment where you see how they arranged their system in the city of Turnhout, and I hope this will work. Yeah.
Hier in Turnhout proberen wij om de ouders een begeleiding te geven naar werk of een job toe. Wij doen het met een methodiek met de poppetjes om te kijken welke achtergrond ze hebben en waar ze naartoe willen. Tegelijkertijd proberen wij om de kinderen in te schrijven in het Lindeke, in de kinderopvang, om hen een vaste paceplaats te geven en zo de ouders vrij te maken om naar een opleiding of werk toe te gaan.
Hier in het gebouw van de kinderopvang op de Siete Druivenstraat zitten 3 verschillende soorten vormen kinderopvang onder één dak. Tijdens de verbouwingen gaan we nog extra ruimte creëren, zodat ook de occasionele kinderopvang het Lindeke hierbij kan komen. En ook zullen we een pace-ruimte realiseren waarin ouders begeleid worden naar hun zoektocht naar werk.
Okay, wasn't that great? So, 4 forms of childcare under one roof and an actual PACE room in the childcare where parents can meet with this key worker. Then let's move to the bottom. Of course, we need parents. It maybe sounds stupid, but let's say that the parents we worked with in PACE, they don't come and knock on your door spontaneously. So you will need a strategy for outreaching, involving and engaging parents, and preferably you also have a strategy on how to let parents support each other. And I'll give some examples in a minute that demonstrate how you can do that. And then the last one, collaboration. I think that's an element that underpins the others. You will have to make referrals. You will try to align the systems. You will have to work together with welfare, education, with private settings in childcare to make sure you can help parents towards employment. And let me give you an example. The city of Ghent, for instance, they had a key worker with a very strong network in the employment sector. She had links with the public employment service, but also with employers and businesses and matchmakers. And she knew the neighborhood really well. And you do see that this helps to keep things moving. So all the PACE partners invested in strong networks, and that's really a success factor. Okay, I've been talking, I think, already for too long, but anyway, let me remind you to send in any questions you may have. I am fully aware of the fact that I'm only telling a little bit about the project, and you might be curious about some things, or you might have some critical questions. They're all welcome. So maybe you're curious about the actual PACE cases. What did the project partners do? How did they make this integrated approach concrete? Well, let me give you a flavor of PACE. And we had 4 countries involved, and we'll start our journey in Belgium. 38-Volt in Mechelen is an occasional childcare setting. Parents and children are actually always welcome there. They don't need to book in advance. Parents can also stay in the childcare. They can have a coffee, they can take part in activities. And what's really fantastic in 38-Volt is that the key worker actually works in the early years setting, a little bit like in Turnhout. So you have key workers. I'll show you the floor plan. I'm not sure if this is really clear, but you can see walking lines of parents. You can see on the top that there was one parent who was probably in a hurry. This parent just dropped off his or her child, but the others, they all come in. They come into the childcare. They have a chat with one of the early years practitioners. They have a coffee, and you see some of them move to the other side of the building where they probably have an appointment with a key worker on employment support. And what parents in 38 Volt emphasize when we interviewed them, it's that they all feel so welcome. So I think that's a great example of the PACE project. I cannot tell you a lot more about it, but I have to shut up and move to the next one, and let's travel to the Netherlands. And maybe this is an interesting example for people from the employment sector. So the Mussen is a community center in the Schilderswijk in The Hague. And they worked with a business coach, a volunteer business coach, who would take people step by step towards employment in a mentor-mentee program. And at the same time, they had key workers who would make sure that parents had a solution in childcare. You may or may not know this, but childcare in the Netherlands is very regulated. It's a lot of private settings, and it's very difficult to create actual flexibility for parents. And parents also report that that is really difficult. So they provided a lot of support in helping parents to navigate the system, all the administration that comes with it, but they also experimented with informal occasional childcare in their community center, and this was really helpful for parents. The mentor-mentee program worked really well because parents could build a trusting relationship with their mentor, who was often someone with a very big network. And I'll show you what parents say about this program. So this is a testimony from a mother from this year, and she says, "Together with my mentor, I had weekly sessions for about 6 months. When I started, my self-confidence was low. I couldn't name my qualities and talents very well. My mentor helped to rediscover them, which helped my self-confidence grow. I have also had support in writing motivation letters and writing my CV." I think this is a testimony that is actually quite representative for a lot of the PACE projects. But it shows that the parents, they really feel their self-confidence growing, also their skills growing, and this really helps them to get back to employment. Okay. Let's go to France. We worked with 3 community centers there, in Arques, in Waterloo, and in Boulogne-sur-Mer. The community centers, the centres sociaux, they were community-based. They have a lot of expertise in-house, as you can maybe see on the small pictures. So they do have childcare, they do have sports activities, music activities, they have key workers. So you might ask, what did PACE do if they have everything? Well, what PACE did was it increased the joined-up working and working more goal-oriented towards what parents wanted. And the key workers worked together and were very well aware of each other's offer. And I'll show a quick fragment that illustrates how this worked out in Waterloo.
Bienvenue à l'association des centres sociaux de Waterloo. On est aujourd'hui au centre social de l'Avenir dans le quartier de Beaulieu pour un café parent qui est un temps mensuel qui permet à chaque parent de faire le point sur son développement personnel. Dans le cadre du projet PACE, nous avons mis en place un certain nombre d'activités collectives pour les parents qui permettent de développer la confiance en soi, la gestion du stress, l'expression en public et la présentation. Parallèlement à cela, les activités ont aussi été mises en place pour les enfants comme le yoga, le cirque, l'éveil musical. Ces activités permettent aux parents de se concentrer sur leur projet.
Le projet PACE m'a permis d'améliorer mon quotidien de maman, de femme, d'améliorer mon projet professionnel, d'avoir des conseils, d'améliorer le quotidien de ma petite famille et d'échanger, de rencontrer des mamans.
De plus, chaque parent est accompagné individuellement par un professionnel pour définir ses besoins et ses envies.
Le projet PACE pour moi c'est beaucoup. C'est un partage avec les professionnels, avec d'autres mamans, avec la halte garderie, Monia, avec qui j'ai pu avoir un contrat de bénévolat depuis le mois de novembre. Je les remercie parce qu'ils m'accompagnent chaque jour, j'apprends beaucoup. Et pour moi le projet PACE, ça m'a permis tout simplement de m'épanouir en tant que femme, prendre du temps pour.
Okay, I have 2 more cases, and I want to remind you, if you have questions or you want to know more about a specific project partner, don't hesitate to put it into the chat. Well, for now, England is still part of Europe. Let's cross at least one of these two seas to the UK. We worked with Kent, more specifically with Gravesham, and I think they are a fantastic example in PACE. Why? Because in Gravesham, most childcare settings or early years settings, they are not public, not subsidized. It's private and voluntary settings or charities. And actually, the Gravesham case shows that even when you work with these private settings, you can convince them to offering occasional and flexible childcare. And Anne Piessens will tell you more about it in the next webinar. But what we found was that this really opened the childcare world for parents who would otherwise not have used childcare. So people who needed it only occasionally to go to appointments or on short notice. And another great example from Gravesham is the fact that the key worker, who was mostly in the children's centers, also had an office at the local job center. So in Vlaanderen zou dat de VDAB zijn, which allowed her to support parents with childcare issues who were in an activation trajectory. But most importantly, she could also upskill the people who worked at the job center and who were often completely unaware of the barriers and the system of childcare. So she really raised awareness there about childcare and the barriers that parents are confronted with. Okay, and then let's go to the seaside, Brighton and Hove. They had a beautifully structured approach to employment, well underpinned by childcare solutions, but I'm not going to focus on that part. You can read all about it in the reports we wrote and in our book. But what they did that was really strong, I think, is that their key workers worked in a team. They could support each other. They could share caseload. But they were also flanked by experts. So the key workers could call in advice from people who had a lot of expertise on childcare, on benefits. It was a really smart system with a very well-functioning back office that did not influence the accessibility for parents. And they also showed that it's very important to give people administrative and financial support, especially in transitions. I'll give an example of that. So this is a very difficult slide, but I'll guide you through it. It's a parent transitioning to work. So they had shown that when this parent would work, she would be £700 better off per month. That's a lot. The parent obviously wanted to work and she had a nursery, but this nursery required an upfront payment of £800, which she was unable to pay. So here you can see that they have several strategies to help in this case. And you can really say if PACE hadn't been there, this parent wouldn't have gone into work. They had a flexible support fund for which they collaborated with the job center. They made sure she could travel free on public transport for a month. They found out about a starting work grant. And when I'm talking about the jungle of rules, you have them in childcare, but you do have them in activation as well. So there's a lot of solutions, but parents don't know about them or they're difficult to get to. So this parent was able to come to an arrangement. She could pay for the childcare and she started work. But I'm really sorry to end on a negative note because actually this sounds like a hooray story. But this parent was actually out of a job a few weeks or months later. She had a child with health issues for which she had to stay at home from time to time. And the employer knew this on beforehand and still he fired her. So I want to tell this story because I also want to make sure you don't think it's all hooray. Even with all this support, you still have demands of the labor market and factors that you can't influence that make it sometimes very difficult. Okay, so again, if you don't agree with me or you have a question, put it in the chat. We're almost there to tackle the questions and to have some discussions, but I'll end with some quick take care and take home messages. So I've been talking about the PACE approach, which is generally quite structured, that gives clarity and motivation for parents and staff, but The flexibility is really crucial. Anne will talk about flexibility in childcare, so I will skip that part, but also in employment support. You have to know that life can get in the way, and parents really need to get a message then that it's okay that they go a bit slower, or that there's like a pause in their trajectory. In Brighton and Hove, for instance, they even formalized that flexibility in a way by saying when there's a lot of barriers and problems, parents are on light touch. So the key worker is still there, maybe even more intense, but the focus will be less on moving to employment. I think that's a great example. Another one is try to change the system while working in it. So of course you will help parents navigate the system, but please at the same time also make the system more accessible. Signal what is not going well, where there are injustices, also in activation. And then the third one, it's a message for people from the employment sector, mostly, I guess. It's important to know that situations change, children grow. There are, maybe a parent has a job with irregular working hours or non-standard working hours. Childcare solutions will change. You can't say, oh, we have it settled and now it will stay okay forever. That's not the case. I have an example to illustrate it, but I will skip it because we won't have enough time for questions. But the main message is you will have to keep thinking about childcare. It actually has to underpin everything that you do when you work in activation. And then the final one, the take-home message that we want to give you from PACE is please take a whole family approach in childcare, but also in employment. Think about the family as you have parents and children. An employee is also a parent, is also other things. When you do that, it will pay off, definitely for the family, but also for the quality of your trajectory and probably also for the success rate. The next one, favor versus rights. If you invest a lot in supporting individual families, you will make a big change for these families, but there will be a lot of other families for whom nothing changes. So please also change the system and try to make a change for more families. For instance, by making childcare more flexible, by making activation more accessible and aligned with childcare. And the last one, there are also some traps, I think, in PACE. I do want to mention that the parents we worked with are parents who are motivated to go to work. We don't want to say that everyone should work. And another thing, we sometimes find that people want to work, but what if there is no work? If there are only precarious jobs, you really have to take that into account as well. And I think another trap could be that we tie access to childcare to employment support. That's definitely not the message that we want to give. We don't want to instrumentalize childcare and believe that it should be accessible for all children, independent of the employment status of their parents. So I think I'm there. I hope you send in many questions and I'll go to the other room and answer them together with my colleagues. But thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Anne, for this enthusiastic explanation. And thank you for all the questions that are coming in. A lot of questions concerning reaching the parents. But I have a specific question for Anne about the key worker. Anne, can you explain? There's a lot of referring to this key worker. Can you explain some more what the function is of this key worker? Is it a coach or?
Well, I think all the PACE project partners worked with key workers who had a background in social work, community work, early help. But as I mentioned in the presentation, the function is to be there for the parent, to be like positive and warm and supportive and boost their self-confidence, but their function is also to take steps towards employment. So that really means, like I said, a process-based approach where you do have a fixed trajectory. So what will this key worker do? There will be informal meetings with parents. There will be, definitely in COVID, there was a lot of WhatsApping and Facebooking, but it's appointments, informal, but also formal, where many partners also worked with the personal development plan to give additional structure to the trajectory. So you start with looking what does this parent want and need, where does he want to go, and then you take steps. And of course, you won't get there with one-to-one conversations. You also refer parents to training, to education, to welfare services, depending on what they want. So it could be that you lose a parent for 6 months because he's in a long education. I don't know if that's clear, but it can be very varied.
Well, Dietlinde?
Maybe we would like to add that a key worker also has some knowledge about childcare and helps parents to find childcare and to find a suitable childcare for their particular situation, which is quite special. A social worker working on employment who also is acquainted with childcare.
Yeah, they need expertise on both sides. They know the systems, they know the solutions that exist, and they really do that matchmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the key worker is really the key.
He's the key, yeah.
And he or she, if I may add, sometimes makes it visible that there is this need for childcare in families, for instance, in employment services. One of the partners had a key worker sitting at a job center so that this need for childcare was visible there.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, can you measure the impact of the key worker?
Probably. I think we did measure it to some extent, in the sense that we had a lot of focus groups, interviews with parents, where we also looked at what makes it work. And the key worker really comes out as crucial. We also saw that in some project partners, they did not work with the key worker from the start. They try to work mainly through collaboration and referrals and aligning the systems, and you do see there that their, let's say, their numbers start going up when they did start working with a key worker.
Okay. Well, talking about the parents, there are a lot of questions that came in about reaching the parents. How did you reach everyone? Who did you include, exclude? Is this good for every parent?
That's a whole bunch of questions.
Yes, yes.
Well, actually, it's the partners who tried to reach the parents, and they all did that in different ways. Some were the community centers, and they already had a group of parents they could reach. What they did was address this topic of childcare for these parents. There were also partners who really went to find parents in places where they thought we may find here parents that could need childcare. It really depends on what is needed in your neighborhood, actually.
Yeah, so it depends on the region. And of course, there were also partners who collaborated with people who could refer with organizations like the job center, like welfare organizations. And we also had partners who were really good in making like leaflets and flyers. We did have parents who say, I picked up your flyer at the school. And did we exclude parents? Yes.
Probably.
Yes, because we worked with parents who were to some extent motivated to go back into employment.
Yeah, and that's maybe interesting to add, because there's more going on in families' lives than work and childcare. They might have financial issues, they might have health problems, housing problems, and when these problems are right in their experiences, it might be difficult to take this step towards work, and then you have to solve other things first.
And isn't there a risk in pushing everyone towards work immediately?
It's certainly.
Yes, that's actually, I think, what Dietlinde tried to explain in the first workshop.
there's this risk, and you have to be careful in policies are changing towards thinking that work is the best way to be a responsible citizen, to take up responsibility by working, by paying taxes, by contributing to social services, to social welfare systems, pension systems, and so on. And also social policies, they see work as a good solution. It's a way to prevent poverty, and it really is. It's also a way to make people be independent. But of course, the step might be very large when you have small children, when you have other problems. So the difficulty is finding your way into it, and all partners had to find their way into it by looking for each individual what would be the best for this person right now, taking into account the way things go as they go.
Maybe I can add something. I think first thing, parents got time, and there was like a safety measure to make sure that it wasn't just pushing people into employment. I think we really looked at how can we improve the overall quality of life for the parent and also for the child. So we didn't go to work. We went to durable work and work of which the parents said, okay, but this is manageable. So there were cases where parents were actually advised not to take a job because it would really be very stressful to take it on. And of course, that's, some parents don't have that luxury or they don't have that choice. But in PACE, that was something we definitely took into account.
I think one partner said it very beautifully. She said, not every job might be good for you. And that's, of course, now with all these flexible jobs, precarious work, it might be not so good for a parent to take such a job, and it might be better to wait a bit and take a course or study and find another kind of job.
I see that there are already a lot of activation programs that are existing. And I was wondering, can PACE replace these programs?
The formal answer is no, because if you're a claimant of benefits and if you're in an existing activation program, like from Job Center Plus, you cannot say, oh, we'll replace it with PACE. I think PACE can coexist then. It can actually, maybe strengthen the way people go to employment. I think we had the ambition to try and create some kind of PACE bubble where we could take over people from the job centers, but I think that's actually quite difficult. But there might be interest, or there has been interest, at least from some countries, in taking over some elements of PACE or integrating the PACE approach in these existing programs. But it's not that we could replace it. But
I'd like to add to that, because I think the main contribution we've done in this project is that we look at the family as a whole, and that we ask employment services, and in this case also childcare services, to look at this family as a whole and to look at more than is your domain or more than is your job. All too often we hear parents tell that an employment officer says, you have to take up this job, and that the parent says, but what about my children? And that the employment officer says, I can't help you with that. Or that they give them a list of addresses, and that is just not enough.
Yeah. And I think on that level we can really change without completely changing everything. But it seems like something small, but it's actually massive.
And it's a mindset. It's about thinking of childcare and taking care of children as not the sole responsibility of a parent, of a family, but as a common responsibility of employment services, employers, and also the whole policy system.
Well, okay. I see it's almost time to wrap up this first workshop. Thank you for sending in these questions. Thank you for the answers. Let's have a break for 10 minutes, and then we will be back with workshop 2 on flexible childcare. Well, hello again. Nice to have you all back with us. And for others who just tuned in, welcome to the Space webinar. We are ready for our second workshop on flexible childcare, where we will discuss which organizational models are possible, how to guide families, and how to support staff. Anne, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lisbeth. Good morning, all of you. We have said a lot of times this webinar that we need more flexibility in childcare. We argued for that in the project and because of the project, but it is easier said than done. Because childcare is actually known for its pedagogical practices and its managerial models that really lean on predictability. So what we are going to do in this workshop is we're going to look through some manners or some ways to reconcile existing practices in childcare with a less predictable context. This way, we hope that parents and families gain access to more sustainable employment and also access to good childcare for them and for their children. So this is an overview for this presentation. I will briefly go into the topic of how flexible childcare can help, and then we'll start with how to start with flexible childcare in 10 advices. Of course, this will be very summarily, and I will want to explain much more, but as you have seen with my colleagues, we have limited time to explain 4 years of work. Anyway, we've written all this down in a book that is freely available, so you will be able to look up some more in the book afterwards. As did my colleague Anne, can only invite you to send in your questions, and in the room before me, they guard the time so that we have time for some discussion afterwards. First, let's start with the question how flexible childcare can help. There is actually a legal definition about flexibility in childcare. I was going too fast. There's a legal definition about flexible childcare and also about occasional childcare. Flexibility means childcare before or after the regular hours, and occasional childcare is childcare on short term, for a limited time, for only a couple of moments in the week. But actually, we want to argue for a more generic and fluid description of flexibility. That has to do with the fact that we are researchers, but also with the fact that there is more flexibility needed in childcare. So at first, we question the current regularity in childcare. There are a lot of pedagogical practices that rely on regularity and predictability, of which we think more flexibility is possible without harming children. And secondly, we argue also that there should be more flexibility in organization and planning of childcare. For instance, if a family right now needs childcare the next week or within a month, more often than not, they hear, "Mom or mother or Mrs., you're way too late." But that is not the reality of a lot of families that here, 1 week to another, they have to start working and they have to find a solution for their families. So we know that the topic or the issue of flexibility in childcare raises a lot of questions. And that's why I wanted to launch this poll. My question is very simple. Should we organize flexible childcare? And there are 4 possibilities of answer. Yes, it's a good idea. Or no, it's not a good idea because of the children. No, it's not a good idea because of the staff. Or no, it's not a good idea for a business. So I come back to this poll later in the hope that this is launched and I can do something with the answers. Before that, I will tell you about the Gravesham pilot. Anne, my colleague, has already introduced this pilot. So in Gravesham, an area in Kent, in the UK, the local authority decided to start up a pilot. They gathered 5 nurseries and 2 childminders in a network, and they wanted to offer occasional childcare places. This was not so easy because nursery staff was really concerned about whether it could meet children's needs. Also, in England, they are used to a lengthy settling-in period, and occasional childcare really is at odds with this lengthy settling-in period. This is not so strange because the policy is based on the ideas of continuity and familiarity for children, so the childcare staff only does what is common sense in childcare in England. The local authority employed 2 strategies. First, they decided to fund the occasional places in these private settings that were offering occasional childcare places. So they already paid for the places, so the managers were sure that financially it would not harm them, and they looked for ways in which they could organize their business plan in such a way that it would be feasible afterwards. But also they organized working visits to occasional childcare settings in another context. And there, the managers had the opportunity to ask questions, and I remember sessions of 3 hours where they kept on asking questions. But these setting managers were also relieved when they saw how these occasional childcare settings were working, and that children were at ease, and that children were comfortable, and that they were well, actually. And that was a big step to be able to introduce it in their own settings. So let's also look at what it meant for a parent. I'm not going to read this excerpt to you. You can read it for yourselves. So in the project, we talked with parents at the start to know what their needs were, what their barriers were, but also when these kind of practices were evolving, we talked with them about what does it mean to you. And this is a mother who was actually quite happy that she used the occasional childcare place. But if you read this example, you also see that she actually shared the concern of the staff. Will it be good for my child? So let's look at the result of the poll. You are very atypical for what we encountered in the project because more than, I don't know if it is percentage or absolute answer. Anyway, the large majority of you says it's a good idea, and a small majority says it's not a good idea because of the children. Let's see what the main concerns were in the project. So the main concerns were the well-being of the children, for the child that is coming occasionally, and for the group of children. Many staff members are concerned that the group of children will be distraught when a child comes in that is not at ease. A second concern we had to deal with is a concern about the quality of childcare. Many childcare staff worry that they will not be able to offer the same quality of childcare when groups are changing and when they can't assess what the group needs every moment. Another problem is the organization of the business. For instance, setting managers were concerned that it would not be financially feasible, but also practical issues such as meal planning. If children come occasionally, you do not always know how many meals you have to order. And the final concern, and it has already been addressed in the why, and it keeps on being addressed, is should we, as childcare, blindly follow the demands of the labor market? If we offer flexible childcare, will employers then not demand more flexibility of parents? And that is actually a very solid concern. They all are actually. So what did we do? We thought we cannot ignore all these concerns and we have to address them all one way or another. And you see this, this bullseye here, in which we say, okay, we have to address the needs of the families, we have to address the needs of the business, we have to address the needs of staff members, and also we have to look at the kind of network you need. The larger question about labor market also has to be addressed, and I will start with this in the next section. So, I'm not used to giving 10 advice or 5 tips or 7 ways to, but right now we will do that, knowing that it is feasible, but it is not always easy. But let's tell you more about some advices for a more flexible childcare. Sorry. Yeah, okay. The first one is start with why. We did this also in this webinar, and we know from some research that has been conducted, but also when we talk to setting managers, if a setting manager or a leader in a childcare setting is convinced about the reasons to do this, then they can easily take their team along with it. And if you're convinced about why you do it, why you offer more flexible childcare, you can transition to questions about how are we going to do that. We also noticed that staff members, that it can actually be really motivating for them to do it. Some find it motivating that they can do something for society and for a group of parents. Some also find it motivating that they can do something for children, that they can give children the opportunity to get to know childcare and maybe to transition to a more regular childcare. And some childcare staff also find job satisfaction in offering flexible childcare. We often look at it is much more work, but some childcare staff really enjoy this kind of work. So start with why and take your team along with you. The second one, it's a bit a complicated one, but that is choose your type of organization. And you have to do that in the project. All project partners did some way of offering flexible and occasional childcare. But there's not one range of tips that you can apply to all settings. So actually, we saw that among these different practices, there are 5 prototypes or 5 models of offering flexible childcare. And all these models, they give an answer to how is it organized, what is the kind of service you offer to parents or to families, how is it more accessible than regular childcare, and what does it mean for childcare practice? The model that we think in the current childcare landscape is the most feasible to use, we don't say it's the best, but it's the most feasible to use, is this model that is shown here. It's a local network of childcare organizations, so nurseries, childminders, that offer flexible places in a regular setting. This is based normally on a local area analysis, and the settings work together to reach the parents. They know what kind of care they can offer. So, for instance, a childminder can offer late night care, a regular childcare setting or a nursery can offer occasional places. So because of the fact that you work in a network in a local area, you can offer different forms of flexibility. Everyone knows who the places are for, and you safeguard these places for your target group. That is, of course, an important one, because if you give these places to the families that have easy access to childcare, then you don't solve the accessibility problem. So, and once you know what type of organization you choose, you can start discovering how you're going to make it work as a business. In the book too, we described it in the business canvas model, and this business canvas model addresses 9 crucial questions that you have to answer if you want to know how you're going to make it work. It would take me really too long to explain it here, but it is available. Although one puzzle piece I want to take out, and that is the puzzle piece about reach out. Often childcare often parents know about childcare through a website or through a flyer or a leaflet, but actually it's not enough for the parents you want to reach. So you really have to look for ways, you have to really look for what do these parents need and where can we find them and how can we address them. Parents also get to know about childcare by hearsay, or say they get to know of childcare by a key worker. So that's also why you need to work together with other organizations, because just the website, just the leaflet will not be enough. Okay, and now we come to one of the most crucial barriers to introducing flexible childcare. If we talked about flexible childcare or occasional childcare with childcare staff, nearly the first thing they say, but what about settling in? So settling in, for those who are not in childcare among you listeners, is the procedure where a child and a family get to know the childcare setting on several moments, mostly prior to the start of childcare. In a settling in procedure, you exchange information about how the childcare works, but also about the child and the family. But also you create a bit of comfort for the child, for the parents, for the childcare staff. Who is this child? How am I going to work with this child? Settling in procedures also give the opportunity to get to know more about how parents interact with their child, and also parents can see how staff responds to a child, and that is mostly not explained, but they see it. When a child cries, do they pick them up or not? So settling in is not is important, but can be a real barrier to flexible childcare, because sometimes parents need childcare 1 week to another. And if you have a settling in procedure that takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that just doesn't help. So what we were looking for was, on the one hand, you have to make strong choices. What do you want to do and why do you want to do that? And on the other hand, a team has to find ways for being flexible and for finding solutions afterwards. If you only have one moment, can you afterwards ask parents about some things you observe with a child? Also, here is a good reason why we chose for this model of flexible places in regular childcare, because if a child has the opportunity to come in a group of children that already knows how things are done, then it's easier for the child to find some anchor points in this childcare. We have a small film I'm going to see. Yes, so the project partners in the projects also made a small Lego Studio movie about how they could handle settling in and intake. Of course, it never is so fast, but it gives an idea of the discussions we did have in the project about how should we deal with this settling in and this intake issue. A second and actually a crucial part of this flexibility is the advice to reflect on your interactions with parents. Of course, many settings do that already. But we also, we heard parents tell us that they felt judged by childcare staff. And on the other hand, we noticed that childcare staff sometimes felt uneasy by the ways parents did things. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. And sometimes when you do not reflect on that, from misunderstanding, you can easily go to judgment. So we developed a reflection model that would give enough flexibility to think about the myriad of situations families are in. So let's say we have a childcare setting and there is a child in this setting, and the child has a parent that only picks up her child quarter before closure time. The childcare staff, in this case, has a problem with that, she says, but this parent stops working sooner. She's ready at 3 o'clock, so why does she pick up her child only at 4:45? This, of course, has to do with several reasons. So in this case, the parent has financial issues and is also following a course, that we know. But what we don't know is another range of issues that might also play a role for this parent. We don't know how her family situation is, so maybe she has to do it on her own. We don't know whether she has, for instance, mental problems. We don't know if she has calendar issues, how it is with mobility. And we don't know whether she has help in her household. I have to be a bit quicker. Also, the same is the case for the childcare staff member, of course, who has also a life of her own and who has also issues she has to deal with. Sometimes this leads to a kind of a misunderstanding and annoyance in between each other. And we noticed that when we employ this reflection model, it can raise a lot of understanding. So, the next advice is make of flexibility your strength. Actually, childcare staff, they are already quite flexible. When working with children, you have to be flexible. But there are also a lot of things you do every day the same way in childcare. So with a team, you have to focus on some core questions. And again, as with settling in, you have to notice what are you going to do, why are you going to do, and how can we find, what can we do in other ways if it is necessary. Yes, I'm going to skip this further. Another one follows from this first one, and it is work with your team on a shared repertoire of pedagogical alternatives. This is a mouthful to say, but actually every setting has its own way of doing things, and some of these things are outspoken and some are very implicit. For instance, if a child cries, how do you deal with that? Especially when children do not have a lengthy settling in period, this can be an issue. Do you pick up the child to comfort it? Does the child has an attention person that really pays attention to this child, and what does this mean for the rest of the work? It can help a team to reflect together on these alternatives for doing things that you find equally well, of course. A ninth advice is to build your village or your network, because childcare is more than taking care of children. That is a core choice in this project. Childcare is also a way of supporting families, and therefore you have to see as childcare that families have much more to do than only taking care of their children, but also being embedded in a network as childcare provider helps you with offering flexible childcare and helps you with signposting parents to your service and to other services. When we say this, we always keep the needs of families in the back of our minds. And the 10th, because we started this project knowing we cannot change right now the policies we think are necessary to do this, but of course we also need generous policies. We think we need to cut the bureaucracy in childcare. We think childcare needs more financing. And we also think there is really more need for more appreciation for childcare work. And we think that childcare policies should be aligned with other policies. Not that childcare policies should follow the other policies, but that they should follow each other. So, these were the 10 advices. I don't know whether you can still read them, but I'm going to stop talking and go to the other room to see what kind of questions you have sent in. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anne, for this talk. And indeed, there are a lot of questions that came in. Questions about legislation, about how to organize flexible childcare, also about COVID-19. But maybe we can start with the first question. What about restrictions in legislation?
Okay, I think we can say a lot about that. We've also done a bit of research, obviously, on that, and there are major differences between the countries. So I think in all countries we have restrictions in legislation, and they mostly come down to administrative requirements, things like occupancy rates. So you have to have a certain number of children, but you can also not exceed that. And in a country such as Belgium, your funding will also depend on that. And then in the UK, for instance, you have fixed sessions and also fixed moments on which you have to ask or apply for funding. So it makes, it makes or it creates a system where parents actually have to plan in advance. So if you have a job tomorrow, maybe you find a spot, but it will be, you won't be able to pay because you can't apply for the funding.
Yes, but there's also a yes, but we think you have to read the legislation broader than it's mostly done in childcare. For instance, in the UK, one of the project partners asked the private nurseries in the surroundings when they were low on occupancy, and then they reorganized their training sessions for parents so that parents could use the childcare at the moments that there was a low occupancy rate. So, for instance, this occupancy and funding issue, actually offering it can help you as a childcare setting to reach your occupancy rate.
Yeah. There are things that you can do to make it work even within the given system. Yeah. We also had a nursery in the UK who actually, she works in the system, but she used it really flexibly herself. So she said to parents, okay, but I'll give you the lower price anyway, and then we'll see afterwards with the funding. It will come around. It's a bit of a choice and a vision and a willingness to proactively, be flexible and make changes. And I think we also have some recommendations about that in the book.
Yeah, but we also, I think that because of everyone wants to do it very well and doesn't want to make any mistake, actually that's the main reason behind that. I think many providers read legislation very rigidly.
Mm-hmm. They don't see the cracks in the system or how you can use the system. Yeah. Turn it around a bit.
Maybe we should change the system.
That too.
That too, because there are, of course, also legislations that are very difficult to find cracks in. Mm-hmm. Some have administrative backgrounds, but you also have legislations based on pedagogical ideas. For instance, in the Netherlands, there is quite a recent policy that children who are younger than 1 year old, they have to have one fixed phase, and this is based on the idea of offering stability to a child. But this, of course, makes it very difficult to offer childcare on short notice or on a very irregular basis, because then you cannot organize the right staff members to be there. You have to have really fixed schedules to arrange for that, and that's difficult to find cracks in. You have to be really an organizational genius to get this done.
You have to know the jungle, and then you can find a way through it. Definitely in the UK, it's a jungle.
Yeah. And speaking about this childcare, this flexible occasional childcare, how do you organize this in your team? I can imagine that it isn't so easy.
That's a very generic question. Actually, what we found is that you do things the way you do in a team, and most of these things are habits, are not really outspoken. That is the way you think you do things. And we always went looking for what do you want to reach by doing this. For instance, this example that Linda gives, this one fixed phase for a child. What does the legislator want to reach by doing this? It's offering continuity or stability, and then we went looking for in what other ways can you offer stability and continuity to a child? You can do that by explaining what you're going to do. You can do that by letting the child integrate in a group of children that knows how things are done. So there are several ways to do it, but, and that's also something in the system that's not quite right, you need time with your team to, every staff member needs time to observe children, and you have to have time to reflect as a team on your observations, because it's not something you just do out of the, just like that. It's not, let's organize some more flexible places and it's solved. No, it takes a lot of care to do it good. And for this care, teams need time.
So next to the key worker that we discussed before, the team is also very important.
Absolutely. They're crucial. Yeah.
And most systems does organize that team members do not have a lot of time, that they are not working with children. And of course you need this time, apart from the children, to reflect as a team. But this costs, of course, this comes with a cost. It's not for free. You need to pay people to think, actually, to think about their practice. But we think it might be a good thing for all childcare, no matter whether they would work in a flexible way or not.
I just got an interesting reaction. Somebody said, instead of talking about flexible childcare, can't we talk about holistic childcare?
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. That's also while we are talking about the whole family model, providing childcare not only for the child but for the whole family. And if it's the family who benefits, you will organize your childcare differently than if it's only the child who benefits. I think it's a nice.
Absolutely.
It's a nice term.
Yeah.
Thank you for the one who asked this question. Speaking about families, we already said that PACE is about the whole family, not only the children and the parents, but as a whole. Our target group are vulnerable families, but are there also people who live in poverty, or people who cannot speak our native language? How do you take these things into account?
Yeah,
I think we definitely had parents in poverty, living in poverty in PACE. And especially in Belgium, I think most parents did not speak Dutch. So when we did a focus group, we had to translate with Google Translate into all kinds of languages, and people had to translate for each other. So that means that parents also bring in a lot of other issues than childcare and employment. They have problems with housing, with health, they have to learn the language. So, I think there was some diversity, but we definitely had parents living in very vulnerable situations.
But I'm going to bring it back to what could it mean in childcare, for instance. There was a parent in one of our partners, and they had to give the meals for the lunches for their children, and the childcare staff were very concerned that this parent really gave too much food to her child, because it was a big lunchbox and only such a small child, and this child had to eat this all. And the staff was very uncomfortable because of it, and they decided that they didn't want to force the child to eat it all. But of course, this is two maybe conflicting ideas about what good food means. And actually, it is an invitation to this team to reflect on it, and it's not a judgment this mother does not know how much this child can eat, but actually it's an invitation to talk about what does it mean that you that you give this much food. So this is a small example, of course. But you wanted to say something too?
Something completely else, but
Okay.
I thought it might be good to add that when the parents do not know the language of the country they are living in, it's for them also much more difficult to know about their rights and to know about the small cracks in the system. And there was, for instance, a couple, and they both had to take an integration course. That's what you have to do in Belgium upon arriving. And it started just next week, and they had to find childcare, and they just did not know how to handle it. And they also did not know whether it was their right to ask to take the course separately, one after another. And PACE was also about helping these parents around in finding their way into the system.
Yeah, and also speaking about this poverty, and I can see that the labor market is problematic, especially, let's say, at the bottom end. How can we have an impact with our PACE perspective?
Yes.
Or not?
Yes, absolutely. But can we change the labor market? No, although... although it should be, I mean, for instance, the example that Linda just told us about, it should not be so difficult for an officer to reflect on: is this a realistic question that I'm demanding that these two parents follow the integration course at the same time? It should be normal that they ask: is this feasible for you? Do you have children? It should not all be the work of the parents themselves.
Yeah. And I think we can also go a step further. I think the key workers, because that's like a micro level you're talking about, they did signal things like that to the job centers, to the public employment services, to employers. But we also, did try to signal things on a more structural level. I think we're also doing it right now. But on the other hand, it's of course naive to think we will change the whole labor market. But that work involving policymakers and raising awareness, I think it was an important part of the PACE project. So we advocated for parents' rights. We try to influence on the level of professionals, but also raise awareness. And
well, let's hope that people who are listening and can really change the system
I think
will
in the
do
book
so.
we also really clearly describe the situations that parents are in. Parents who are motivated, of course they're motivated to make a good future, take care of their children, go to work, and then you sometimes see they're really like stuck in what I would say is an injustice.
Yes.
And it's also about the mindset. We are talking about the labor market, but usually you have like a work-life balance, but work, that's work. And it comes with a fixed schedule, and it comes with a lot of responsibilities. But the private part might consist of a lot of different things about taking care of children, but also taking care of other people, family members, neighbors perhaps. It's about hobbies, it's about personal development. It comes with a lot of things, and we separate it very strictly when it comes to policies, when it comes to organizing our systems. And it's also about raising awareness in people who are working in one small part, in one like policy office, to take into account the whole, the holistic thing, to come back to the word.
The whole,
that holistic comes back. But did we meet the limits of the system? We definitely did. There were some parents who also told us, no, I have a job, but it's still not a really nice job. And then you see that it's difficult to go further sometimes.
Because you do see that for parents who are entering or finding their ways into the labor market, a lot of jobs are in retail or they are in bars and restaurants, and they come with uncomfortable hours.
Yes.
And then you have this
and
problem.
In Brighton and Hove, for instance, when a parent would complain to an employer, yeah, there's a whole line of university students very willing to take all these flexible jobs, also very willing to take over their houses. So, yeah, sometimes they're just pushed away and they don't, they say, I can't complain, otherwise I'll lose my job, and it did happen.
Yeah. I often wonder for policies and policymakers if there's really enough sensitivity for the diversity in situations in which people live. And if I wonder, I know my answer, but this is just not manageable.
Yeah. Yes, it's all very interesting. We can talk for hours. Yes. But just one last question in this childcare system, flexible childcare. We have a COVID-19 situation. How was that at the end of our project? How did we manage? Did we manage?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you look at it. Of course, it had a massive impact on parents. It's an additional strain. There were definitely parents also losing their job. There was less possibility to rely on informal care because you couldn't have any contact with grandparents or with other people. It also, I think it threatens a lot of early year settings, especially in the UK, maybe also the Netherlands, where you have a lot of private settings, so we might lose places. And then with regard to flexible and occasional childcare, I think for flexibility, it's maybe good because we did show that it is possible if we have to. For occasional, it's more difficult because with COVID, we want group stability and fixed bubbles for parental involvement, like you had the walking lines in Mechelen. Yeah, that's not possible. So it's a bit mixed. I don't know if someone wants to add. But,
yeah, certainly all the work we have done on parental involvement, on parents who were not acquainted with childcare, having the opportunity of being in the group with their child, of seeing what was happening there, that was all not possible anymore due to the COVID crisis. And that's really, really a pity. And I think also for future parents or families, it will make a huge difference because it's really important for parents who are worried about, and of course they are worried about the well-being of their child, to just see the child in the group.
Yeah, maybe just one last thing. I did want to say that the PACE project partners, they continued their work and they just went to a kind of online approach. So they kept supporting parents, and I think it's great what they actually did. I know in Mechelen they went from door to door with their face mask on, but they wanted to keep in touch with the target group.
Yeah, there was certainly a lot of creativity on that side.
And flexibility.
And flexibility.
Okay, well, thank you. You already got a lot of information and some more dissemination material is available on our webpage, mechelen.be/PACE final event. In PACE, each partner completed the project on his own way and information was shared with a view to transnational cooperation and the exchange of best practices. You can read about this cross-border cooperation in the PACE handbook that is ready for use. Maybe you can see it's really a handbook. It's nice to read. There's some practical stuff in it. The aim of this handbook is to show that we should think about making childcare provision more adaptable, and we offer some concrete suggestions on how to do so. It also outlines why flexibility is necessary and how it can be achieved. People who helped creating this book will receive a copy. And for all the others, you can also find it on our website, mechelen.be/PACE PACE final event. Next to this handbook, there are some other practical documents we've created for you. Most of them are in 3 languages, so you can deploy a PACE project in your own neighborhood. We have prototypes of employment support that describes the different models we used to guide parents into employment. We have a PACE roadmap on how to lead parents to employment. You can download these things, print them, you can hang them up, very easy in use. Also 4 checklists that provide tips and tricks for different types of organizations. Also, our partners tried out new models of flexible childcare and integrated support. Now, we had some questions about legislations. What is required to upscale these models? How easy or difficult is it to implement these on a larger scale? A feasibility study gives an overview of the main legal and organizational barriers to upscale this PACE approach, along with answers on how to deal with these. Finally, also an impact report for people who like to read that summarizes the key results of the project, as well as the key impact factors according to parents that were interviewed in the course of this project. Next to these documents, this webinar will also be available on the webpage. Please be free to download these documents and to share our webpage. And if you are curious about PACE in the other countries with our other with all the 13 partners. On the webpage, you will also find their logos. Just click on it and you will be redirected to them, so you can email them or phone them with your questions. Finally, before going to lunch, let me say thank you. This project would not have been possible without the efforts of so many people. We like to thank Interreg 2Cs and their staff, more than 500 parents who were willing to share their experiences, and of course their children, all the researchers, the providers of pedagogical support, all the employees of the PACE project partners, people that did not participate in this project, but were willing to share their knowledge and experience. Thank you. And then all the others who were an inspiration for this project and who have made PACE a real success. So all that is left for me is to say thank you all here. Thank you all for being here with us today. I would say spread the PACE and have a lovely day. Goodbye, au revoir, tot ziens.